Okay, so it is being recorded. So I'm your host Diraj Pandey, and I'll be with you throughout this event. So we are basically talking about React and its different implementation and application. React is a very popular JavaScript library, which is used for building user interface. Without further ado, let me introduce you, our speaker, Mr. Sanket Upreti. He's a front-end developer at Proshore with an experience of 1.5 years, currently working in React. He's an enthusiastic individual and is very keen on sharing his knowledge and idea. So he's a perfect fit for Proshore as a developer. Today he's going to talk on the topic, learn data fetching from useEffect to React query. I hope you'll enjoy this presentation. And if you have queries, we'll answer it at the end. So Sanket, over to you now.
Yeah, thank you. It was great hearing such kind words from you. Yeah, so I've been working with Proso for about more than a year, I would say, and it's great to see that yeah, developers more than 2 years are joining here. Um, and it's great to see that everyone is so enthusiastic. But today we'll be talking about use effect and use query. And that will be the main subject of our webinar for today. So without any further delay, let me share my screen. Okay, so once again, welcome everyone. Today's topic is data fetching from useEffect to React query. That's what we're going to cover. I'm Sanket, and I will be the spokesperson for today. Uh, so React query, from data fetching from useEffect to React query, or currently we know it as TanStack React query, TanStack Query, um, is actually a new version for the React query. We are currently on the version 4 of React query, and the inventor, their creator, Linsley actually named it TanStack Query, and we currently know it as TanStack Query. Furthermore, we can also call it our session for today, data fetching from useEffect to useQuery. This is my preferred title because this actually explains the hook that we're going to be studying today, that we're going to be going on deeply today. Okay. So starting with data fetching. So what exactly is data fetching, right? Okay. So let me just hide this. Okay, that's nice. So data fetching, the process of retrieving data from a server or database. Yeah. So easier said than done, but okay. And the reference for it can be a fishing hook. So when we go out on a fishing, or where we have seen a fishing, we see that the rod is used to fetch fetch of fish from the water, so that it can be used for eating or any purposes. Similarly, data fetching is can be described in similar manner. It actually also uses hook from a particular server or a database and fetches information to be used later. It can be displayed, integrated, or processed. It is up to the developer what they're going to show, what they're going to display on their website. Popular data fetching libraries such as Axios, GraphQL are the very used um, libraries for data fetching. And there is also a fetch, which is actually built in on most of our web browsers. So we don't need to actually import it. We won't be talking about GraphQL today because it has its own learning curve. And personally, I haven't even covered it, so we won't be going on, but I wanted to tell you that it is possible with GraphQL as well. Okay. Uh, Talking about fetch versus Axios. So two of the most popular, I would say right now, for data fetching. So what are the differences between them? We look at the features of accessibility. So just like I said, fetch is actually built in, while Axios needs to be important as a library. If it can import it as from npm or yarn, it is up to the developers. Syntax fetch actually returns a promise, and so does Axios, but promise-based HTTP client is actually looks cleaner and easier or to maintain, or I would say. Personally speaking, I prefer Axios, and that's what we're going to use today. Error handling fetch, it is slightly difficult, I would say, because in terms of fetch, when we're using fetch, we actually cannot catch the error which are which throw status code such as 400 or 500. So we need to console log it, and that is a new thing that I discovered while I was actually preparing this presentation. Talking about Axios, Axios is much easier. I think some of us have already used Axios, and it is it makes our life easier. That is the most easier way to describe it. Request handling for fetch manually, because we need to send request from our side to the server, maintaining our the string of the string, or I would say the data, to so that it does not get messed up while we send it to the server. While Axios, it gets automatically adjusted while we send our request. Moving on. So starting with React, we have been using React for quite some time, and for the data fetching part, we mostly use hooks. Then for the presentation part, we use JSX. And this is possible through the libraries that we discussed before. Talking about hooks, the most popular way to fetch data, or the traditional way, I would say, is use of use state and use effect. Use effect, we fetch, or we use Axios to bring our data, and then we set it on our state, and then we map it on our JSX, and that's how we have been doing it traditionally. And personally, I have been doing it for the most of my measure of my part before I have started using React Query. React Query has actually made it much easier. But before that, let me ask you one simple question. Do you use effect or use query? I would have asked, but I think the poll already mentioned that about 53% of the audience that we here use effect for for their data fetching needs, while 20% of them use query. Um, I hope to increase the people who use query so that next time when the such webinar happens, then I hope to see that more than 20% are actually using use query. I hope that this webinar will change your mind on the use of TanStack React Query. So use effect. What makes use effect such fun way, or the major people using it? What makes the people use effect more than the use query? I think because it's run sequentially, I mean asynchronously, and it's SF dependencies. The dependencies are actually the main reason how the re-rendering of our website works. When we use effect through Vite or through create React app, there is a slight difference, because what I've noticed is when we're using create React app, we need to specify where the function name to the dependency, while Vite does not require to be mentioned on their dependency as dependency, so that the re-rendering occurs. It handles it automatically. The use effect is really cool, but we prefer use query, as I said. Carrying on, use effect, talking about use effect, all in all, it allows side effects, and the side effects are really cool because it allows us fetching libraries, setting state, it allows us doing anything. Okay, so actually we don't even need an use effect. Um, our React documentation has currently updated to a better version, it is written really nicely. It was already written nicely, but I went through it and it is not bad at all. So let's go back. Um, okay. So you might not need an effect. So you can actually go through it, but I was trying to show that it actually works from the next slide. So it is, the video is not playing. So let's forget it about it. Forget about it and let's move on, I think. But you can check out this website React. You might not need an effect URL. So it has a very nice description or documented about why we should use an effect, or why we should use an other way. Before our documentation was updated, there was written about useQuery being of a condition to be used, because React, even though they offer us use effect, they don't ask us to use it more often because of the re-rendering issue and all. Also, we need to add cleanup function to them as well. So it creates a sort of congestion among us. So to avoid this, we shift to libraries. Now, before moving on to React Query, which is our next part, let me show you my code which uses use effect. So use effect, I've named my component demo use effect. It is an all right code, not to measure, but I've been using async and await, and I've used Axios as my library. I'm running my backend server from localhost. It is actually a package. Let me share you what I've been using. I'm running this script called fake DB. It's just how I name it, but you can name it differently. The packages that I've used are TanStack React Query, TanStack React Query DevTools to show you guys how it actually works on how it stales the data, how it caches the data. So give you a brief idea on it. JSON server is the backend server. I have actually created a sort of data structure to map my data. It's and React Router DOM to um, go into different component through and pass my data. So going back to use effect, we have called use effect. I have called get domization function to my use effect. The get domization function has const get data, where I've set data using use state, and I've set loading to false. Initially, the loading remains true, and then when the data is not fetched, the loading is shown to the user before it moves on to showing us the data. The data is mapped here. After the data is fetched, the set data gets filled and set loading is false. So this is how we've been using it traditionally. My backend server is giving me the I've named it cars because I'm a bit of obsessed with cars, but uh, product name Ferrari. This is all my data, so I won't go deep into it. Um, so it looks not that I won't leave. Okay, forget about it. Here this is 3 of my page. From here I'm calling my data from use effect here from React Query, and this is my welcome page. Here you can see that the dev tool is this doesn't show, but when I go into my React Query, it will be all my data will be shown. This is my query key. I will get into it later. Currently, when we try to demonstrate demonstrate data from use effect, this is the map data. Um, this is working all right, but this can be better. If we check our network tab, also I hope when you're working, your React strict mode is not not on, because it actually re-renders, so that causes an issue sometimes. network tab, when we go into our welcome tab to tab, cars is called, and this is already, there is no problem at all, but we want to use it in such a way that it caches and not calls it. So when use effect, so when we try to cache from use effect, there is actually a lot of code that needs to be added. While using React query, it automatically gives us the option to cache the data, or the time we want to stale it. There are lots of functions. So let's move on to React query now. Yeah. So up to now, we have we have looked into what, why, and hows of the use effect. Now we will learn about what, why, and hows of TanStack React Query. So what is TanStack React Query? It is actually a library for manipulating and caching data in React app. It is very handy, and it is very easy, I would say, because the syntaxes are very easy, and most of it is handled by React Query itself. What React Query actually does is, it when a component tries to fetch a data, it actually on the first try, gives away the data, but when we try it again, and if it is already fetched, then it intercepts and provides us with the old data, and if it needs to be fetched again, it goes and does it on the background. Why we do it? It is because simply data fetching simplifies data fetching. The caching is much easier, and error handling and retries are its core features, which it provides on the default. The retries React query, if a certain request is failed, React query actually tries it 3 times, and then it shows an error message, which we can actually use on our website to let the users know that it is simply not working. It does by using a query instance, using the use query hook. We will go through it. This is our demonstrate use query hook. So here you can see, but let me go into our parent component. I have use query. It is our, if you have used Redux, you may be familiar with it. It wraps our component from head to toe, and then it passes client. The client is called the query client. It sends query client to be used to the other components. The query client has all these functions that I discussed before: error handling, retries, loading. It provides us on the go, so it makes it lot easier. Here you can also find React query dev tool. This is for my debugging purpose. And then when I try to demonstrate use query, the so this is my DOM JSON. It is similar to what I showed you in the use effect hook. This is my use query hook. This usually accepts 3 arguments. The first one being the key. The DOM JSON is my key, because it is just a um, random JSON that I prepared. Then the query function, it accepts query functions as well. And the third function is, which we are going to talk about later, the query function, or the fetcher function as people mostly call it. Get dummy JSON is our function. It can also be written as an arrow function and then passed, but I prefer it this way. This looks much cleaner. Is loading each error data is provided by use query, so that can be used automatically. We don't need to show a state to show the loading on our website. And this is just me mapping our data. Let's look at. Okay, so I'll be calling my data from use query. And here you can see that I have my key over here. And then this is all the properties that it provides. Still, we will be talking about it later. We'll be going through it. And if I if I go back to welcome page and go back to React query, then you can see that there is no loading step because it automatically caches our data. And if we actually try to reload our data, then you can see a loading coming just a brief second before before our old data is shown again. So this is the feature of React Query, that the first time it actually fetches all our data, then it caches it so that when we go on to our other pages and then we come back, if there are no changes, then we don't need a loading state. So this is good when it comes to user experience, I guess. Okay, so moving on to our another. Um, so yeah, useQuery is the hook that is used to handle all the response asynchronously, just like I showed you. And it also allows us to fetch and manage data. So these are a few of the properties this are the few of the third argument that React Query provides us. Starting with caching, that is probably my favorite part of React Query. Caching, it actually has default time of 5 minutes. Um, so when I showed you that the React Query caches, I didn't actually tell you that when we go to our different page and spend almost like 5 minutes on it, then the term is it actually expires and it is garbage collected. So when we go back to from React Query tab after 5 minutes, then it shows loading again, but it does not show now because as we have been I've been probably gone for like 10 seconds. um we can actually see it on see it we can pass a third argument. What we can do is they have a property called cache time, and I will call 30,000. It takes milliseconds as its values. When we go back, I'm using bits, so it automatically updates. And then after 3 seconds, my values will be garbage collected. Let me see if my demonstrate use query is, oh yeah, it's okay. We can also write it without an object. If we write it without an object, we don't really need uh, all these keys. And here we need to write it on as an object so that it recognizes that we're using object and nothing object and not anything else. Okay, so going back to React Query, the data stays. We go to welcome page. We wait for 3 seconds, and then it gets garbage collected. The key gets disappeared, and we go back to from React Query again. We see a loading for a brief second, and then our data reloads, refetches again. Okay. Okay, so that is not just if I go into my README, I have actually created what the third arguments that the use query accepts. The cache time, it accepts number. The default time is 5 minutes. Stale, what do I mean by stale is that stale data may not be up to date, or they may not be accurate. So such data are called to be stale, and such data stale time can be passed on so that our old data can get garbage collected and we can fetch new data again. The default time is 0 minutes, so it gets garbage collected again and not garbage collected exactly. Sorry, I mean it refetches again and again. But stale time, if we try to maintain a stale time for around 5 seconds, then it gets stale for 5 seconds. There are other third arguments also. So if we look at polling, what do I mean by polling is the real-time update of data. So when we suppose we have been you seeing that SARE is everywhere. The SARE data gets updated time and time again. So such type of data, when they are updated time and time again, they are um, what is called, the terminology is called polling. This technique is used to retrieve new data at regular intervals. We can set it as well as from the third argument. It pauses when window loses focus. So if the user switches to a different window, it does not actually retrieve the data again and again. And it is a real-time update. So it needs to happen again and again. And then also the third argument, we can pass user events. So until now, we have been letting user query handle, use query handle everything, but also user can handle most of the part of it. Fetching can be done on user's action. So if there is a button and if the user presses on it, then we can find that only then refetching is occurred. Rather than what we have seen before, that when we move on to a tab, the refetching is done. Let me show you that. This is my tab. This is my demo user event. So here, the demo user event is enabled as its third argument. Um, Also, talking about the default properties, refetch on mount. This is what SFs boolean or string only. It only SFs always as a string, not anything else. The refetch on mount is default remains true, but we can maintain it or change it to false. Refetch on window focus. So it is similar to polling, right? So we change our focus to another window and we come back, then it if we uh, t- if we keep our value false, then it does not get refaced on false. Also else it is our default property, so no need to probably go on that. Refetch interval, it is a part of polling. Refetch interval requires a number, so default property is false, but if we add a number to it, it actually gets refaced again and again, similar to the say example that I said to you. The say needs to be say gets updated time and again. So it is very handy when it comes to such thing. And as I said, that when we switch our windows to a different tab, it pauses and stops refetching. So that can be actually, when we shift focus, we can run the fetching as well through refetch interval background. It accepts default property as false, but if we try it true, then everything is all right. User event enabled false is it does not allow fetching on mount. Then when we use refetch, which actually is provided by useQuery itself, then it starts to fetch only when a certain event click handle is used by the user. So let me show you. So my enabled, this is my custom custom hook. I've created a custom hook here. I don't think this needs to be set, but let me enable false. Okay. No, I can write it that way. That is fine. But if we are not using object, then this is fine. And then the enabled false property goes. And I think I need to use this component first. This is not getting used. So when demo user event, and after I go on to it, there is a demo user event is not defined. Oh, I need to import it first. My bad. Happens. Yeah, and it is loading. Second page, it is loading. I think there is some issue with it. Configs. The data is not showing because get DOM is JSON. The value is not. Okay, I can actually demonstrate it over here. So I don't think I need to do it over there. So let me just enable false. And then let me add button which accepts on click and refetch. I have not got it from here. So let me, after this is done, this will work fine after I okay. This is fetching data, but it is not getting a data, so that's why it is on a loading state. I don't know what I'm trying to show. Okay, my bad, but this is the idea that when we try enable first, then only when a user selects on or selects a particular thing, then the refetching occurs. I think we need to move on because the data is not getting shown and the loading is continuously showing. Okay. Yeah, so moving on. Another is the use of params. So from what we have seen, when we switch to a tab, our three data is displayed, which are the types of cars. But when we click on cars, we can actually go on to a different URL with their params on it, /1, /2, /3. It depends on the which card you click. So it can have its particular data, and use of params is quite famous on useQuery, and this is done through use params. It is actually, we get it from our React router DOM, and it also accepts dynamic queries. Moving on to use queries now. Use queries, it allows us to fetch and manage multiple data. So until now, we have talked about single data fetching, but use queries actually allows two or more data to be fetched in a parallel, or if we manage it, then we can do it on a in a synchronized way as well. It handles response asynchronously. This is, I think, the general idea of use query. So moving on, parallel queries and dependent queries. So parallel queries are just what I said, that when we have one or more UI API to be fetched, then they can go side by side, so that when we fetch our data, they are shown together and not one after another. So it also improves the performance along with being resource efficient, as the latency is actually managed through it. Dependent queries, just imagine that you are calling one API which has a certain value which you want to append on another API and call a certain value or a particular data. It can be done as well through use queries. Let me show you an example. So for parallel queries, we actually pass this is an example I took from YouTube. The parallel queries actually passes two or more data. So in this case, the superheroes has hero ID. The hero ID can be any number. We were not sure. It can be 2 or 3 numbers. So in order to not show the loading state, we actually call parallel page, so that when certain value is fetched, we automatically cache it, and so that we go to the particular URL with params. We don't need to refetch it again and again. It is done by mapping the data. As we have one or more, then the most popular thing on React is maps, and we certainly map it over here and display our data. Another being dependent queries. So this is the condition where we wait for our first API to be completely fetched before calling another API, because the second API depends on the first API. And we, as the user event, we have seen that the third argument that before user event SF enabled. So here the double negation channel ID means that only if channel ID is passed or the channel ID value is there, then only we fetch our courses by channel ID. So only then our second API is called. And this is how dependent queries work. And this is easily managed through useQuery. Moving on to prefetching. Prefetching is the condition where we store data in the cache before it is actually needed. So it is done for better user experience and improve performance. But this is done by forecasting what the user's gonna do next. So I have a certain syntax on my README file. So this is how prefetching is done. We import prefetching from React Query, then prefetching, just like how we fetch our data, we pass in a key, then we pass in our fetcher function, and then after fetcher function, the value is then since we're using fetch, then value we need to store it as JSON. This is how prefetching works. This is quite famous actually right now. So we talked about what it is, why it is done, and how it is used. Moving on to mutation, I think this is the after caching, this is by far the most popular theory on the use query. Mutation is done as we're talking about data fetching, but this is actually a data posting, what I will say, because until now um, we have been getting data from Axios, but we can actually post data from Axios as well. For the posting data, we actually have used mutation. The use mutation hook, which React Query provides on default, is used for this purpose, and it actually modifies the data on the server side for performance and flexibility. What it does is when we call it, it actually gives us the data. So we can actually already use the data and show the result automatically through the use of invalidated queries. So what is invalidated queries is, uh, suppose we have a method to we have certain data that needs to be refaced because the previous data has already inaccurate, or we can call it stale. So for that purpose, we can actually invalidate our queries. It is popularly used with mutation. It is the method to mark queries as stale and potentially reface them too. To reface data or to clear our stale, this is why we use our invalidated queries, and it also actually handles multiple queries. This goes hand in hand, and the popular example for it can be that when we use our okay, yeah, so there was an error, right? Let me go for there. So suppose, imagine that we have a input tab, input div over here with 2 or 3 values that needed to be posted. Straight after we post it, we can actually use that data and show it immediately. It shows a certain thing that our website is fast, and for that purpose, invalidated queries comes in very handy. Invalid queries can be used with many keys, but this is one of the example of how we use it. We use it with query client. We invalidate our query and we pass in our query key, which right here is to-dos. So what it does is it looks for to-dos, and after it finds to-dos, it invalidates and pass it to stale. And immediately when the stale data gets is expired, then our data is immediately shown. So this comes in very handy. So stale data is by default 0. So it is pretty fast when we use invalidate queries. Yes, yeah. So what are my final thoughts? TanStack React Query is actually powerful, but I won't say that this is the only thing that you need to use when there are small apps or there are many codes which already use this use effect hook. So I won't change it altogether, but since we're learning React Query, I urge you to learn it, but for small apps, use effect works just fine. And it makes data fetching much easier. I don't know what to say about it. These are my final thoughts. And for conclusion, I hope you will listen to me, and not even though you won't use it for continuously for every project, I hope you try it out, you test it out. And so my final question for you is that will you use effect or use query? Because that's how we started with two question, and my presentation ends with a wheel question. So that is it from my side. Thank you.
Mm. Thank you, Sangeet. That was really quite informative sessions. So using the host power, I have some questions of my own, if you could answer that. The first question I wanted to ask is, we talked about a lot about caching, right? So can we cache our data at local storage session cookies using React Query?
We actually can store our data on local storage and session storage, but we can't actually store it on cookies. To store it on cookies, we actually need a different library, and we can do it. I've already mentioned about query client. On query client, we need to pass an argument which uses cache as its key, and then we can pass it as new cache and mention it as storage, local storage or session storage, whatever you prefer. And that is how we can do it.
Is the TanStack query only for React?
TanStack, when I looked into its documentation, it actually allows spelled solid or view to be used as well. So I guess it's not.
Okay, thank
I
you.
haven't used it, so I'm not sure, but that is what documentation provides.
So thank you for the my questions as well. If any of you have any questions, you can raise your hand and ask a question as well. We'll be having the Q&A session from now. So if anyone has any questions, we can address that.